Hi, you're watching a very special recording of Agenda AWANI right here in Chile, Davos, but I'm bringing to you a hot discussion because our future in Malaysia, Indonesia, ASEAN as a whole, we, by numbers, by groupings, very impressive indeed, compound annual growth, we're right up there among the best of the world, but growth is not everything. What about distribution of wealth? What about the power to innovate and move with the times? Here at the World Economic Forum, the phrase, the term, fourth industrial revolution a few years ago was first coined and discussed heavily by everyone from around the world. But now is the time for practice. And this time for World Economic Forum 2018, I've been in a few discussions, I've interviewed a few experts on that particular journey, and now I'm back to home because I'm sitting here with Jiran Tetangga, Shirley Santoso, a very, very powerful lady in terms of strategic thinking and also galvanization of policy, of execution of policy, especially in terms of economic strategy in the production and manufacturing sector. You're a consultant, you're a strategist with A.T Kearney, you're a partner, but I want to come at it from not a doomsday perspective, but just like the discussion I was present at the ice melting in the Arctic and, you know, sort of we being in denial about it. For ASEAN, for Malaysia, for Indonesia, manufacturing has been a game changer for us in the 1980s and then the 1990s. But we all know, we all use smartphones now. Is it being manufactured in Southeast Asia? I don't think so. So you look at Foxconn and what it has done for Taiwan and China. Where are we in that? You know, we're still talking about wafer and semiconductor in the 90s, but then there was optronics, and I don't really know where we are now as a grouping. So I'm going to let you answer this question. Are we, as a community of ASEAN, collectively and individually as countries, are we going to survive the disruption in production and manufacturing? Because other parts and other regions of the world, they are really, really moving on this.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you our study. Actually, that's a very super exciting question. So I think, I mean, if we look at manufacturing, so manufacturing is basically central to any country's economic development. Now, globally, it accounts a fourth of the global employment, a third of the global GDP. Within ASEAN, actually, manufacturing accounts, ASEAN is the world's fifth largest manufacturing activity measured by value-added terms. And in the last 4 years, actually, manufacturing has grown at compounded annual growth rate of 5%, which is a growth that outpaces any of the global peers except for China. Now, within ASEAN, actually, we are seeing that the future of production is disrupting ASEAN in several ways. First is actually an opportunity. We see that there's a shifting of geography of production from China to ASEAN as the next manufacturing hub. The second, we also see the shifting geographic of consumption, especially with the growing middle class income in ASEAN. But thirdly, what we also see is there's a human capital mismatch. So the ASEAN country who used to rely on labor as a source of competitive advantage, it's no longer sustainable in the new world. And if you look at the labor productivity on average for the ASEAN country is much below, say, for example, China. And also we see that the technology-based manufacturing model are starting to make inroads in ASEAN. So what does it mean for ASEAN? So we are actually working very closely with the World Economic Forum on future of production country readiness assessment study. So what we do actually, we take 69 indicators, which is a group under structure of production and drivers of production to look at the readiness of country globally, and it's 100 countries in the world to look at how ready they are to embrace the fourth industrial revolution. Now within the ASEAN context, we see that some countries are basically put as a global leader. That means they are ready to embrace the fourth industrial revolution. Those are like Malaysia, Singapore, Then there are countries who are, trying to get there, which we call the champion, the legacy champion, such as, for example, Thailand in this case. And also we see that there are countries that are nascent, so they are on the journey, new, going to be there, like Indonesia, Vietnam, and Cambodia. So we see that in ASEAN that there are varying degree of readiness of the various ASEAN countries to embrace on the fourth industrial revolution. But what is good about the ASEAN countries is that even though they have the different degree of awareness, the government is also really start to think about the fourth industrial revolution. So we see, for example, the Singapore government has already the fourth industrial blueprint. Malaysia also is getting there. Indonesia is also on the journey, towards the blueprint, and as well as Thailand is already there. So the level of awareness is basically there. So then the key is, how can we help ASEAN countries to accelerate basically their readiness for the fourth industrial revolution? How can they basically collaborate to make sure that they are ready for the fourth industrial revolution?
I'm glad to have accreditation to go into the forum, but still, more than 400 meetings and discussions, many of them are closed door and meetings. So I'm going to steal some insight from you on that. I think yesterday you told me that you were in the closed door discussion of ASEAN and the future of production. So let's pick out salient points from there that can give us hope moving forward. Because sometimes while the leaders can chart and strategize blueprints, but when it comes to the execution, the people and the masses need to be in tandem with the strategies and the awareness and the execution of things. So I have to go for the first break, but once we are back, when you say that cost competitiveness, especially in terms of chip labor, is no longer going to be our mainstay for ASEAN, if I look at it from another end, that also means that many people who have and are still working in those kind of lower technology skills, they will be displaced. And the transition is not just going to be, okay, tomorrow I'm going to change you to this new department and you're going to be able to do that. Even at the World Economic Forum, there's a specific grouping and initiative, strategizing and trying to execute. How do you reskill people from the old 3.0 to the new 4.0? I think that's also a very testing hurdle for ASEAN. Let's discuss that after this short break, because it doesn't get more populous than Indonesia in ASEAN. So if Indonesia can break that particular barrier, other countries surely can, right after this break. You are still watching a very special edition of Agenda AWANI, sitting here with great people at the World Economic Forum in Davos. World Economic Forum 2018 now looks at many things. Initiatives on the fourth industrial revolution has already, been moved all around the world, wherever that World Economic Forum has its tentacles and groupings and networks. One such thing is to look at the future of production, and that includes ASEAN. We all know how industrializing and manufacturing have helped at least a whole generation of ASEAN population to move to the next level of income and society's well-being. But now everything is being disrupted. Me in the media, I'm being disrupted by something that's happening in California or Los Angeles, San Francisco, because Facebook and Google, for example, they just take the carpets from right under our feet. Because we're in the old, they're in the new. Map that to the industrial revolution for production and manufacturing, the task is gigantic. So maybe some of the discussion you already participated in at Davos give you a semblance of light moving forward, if you can share with us.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I think within the ASEAN countries, the good things is the level of awareness is already there. Now, the key is how do we actually address the challenges that exist in ASEAN?
Awareness is at policy level, right?
Yes, at policy
so
level.
So how does the other parties come
Exactly. So I think that's why in terms of the challenges, we see it at several levels. The first one is that we need to create a dialogue platform, which means that the awareness should not be just at the policy level, but also at the businesses level. So how can we, ASEAN or the government, create that level of awareness on the benefit of the fourth industrial revolution? So hopefully we don't see this as something that's frightening, because we as ASEAN countries and the businesses need to learn how to embrace this and use this to basically unleash new opportunities. So that's number one. Number two is, as you rightly mentioned, is how do we deal with the human capital issues? So how do we reskill and upskill the labor force? That's very important in the fourth industrial revolution. How do we also prepare the future labor force?
Yes.
Because the skill set that they have would be very different.
Yes.
So in this context, we discuss a lot how can government, together with the private players, together with the academia, actually can upgrade the skill level, because it's not just government alone, but it needs a multi-stakeholder approach.
Okay.
What sort of incentive can be given to also do the reskilling and upskilling? And within the ASEAN context, as we know with the AEC blueprint, there's a intention for the free flow of talent.
Correct.
So how can we also facilitate the talent movement and mobility within ASEAN to basically quickly bridge the skill gap in the shorter terms?
Understood. Let me go a bit off the tangent and look at the fact that the last time I interviewed Pak Jokowi, few months ago, he talked about the need of infrastructure across thousands of islands of Indonesia. So when we talk about automation, when we talk about robotics and big data, for us in Southeast Asia, that also means building new bridges.
That's right.
That also means building new telecommunication towers.
Yes, that's right.
That also means paving new highways for goods to transfer. How do we move this? Because even Europe had decades to set that in place. First they built the rail network, then they improve on their manufacturing, and then they have the exports and stuff. But for us in Southeast Asia, it's like we have to take that in history and then couple it with the present and add that with the future of the fourth industrial revolution. Where is this money going to come from? Because all of this will need investment. FDIs has been one of the main way we've been doing it in the 80s and 90s and early millennium. Do you think that's still the way to go? Because I see more and more discussion here in Davos also about private equity. Indonesia, a very powerful lady, Ivo Petrushka, who heads the ASEAN Insurance Council, looks at how to use the cash-rich insurance industry to have long-term investment into infrastructure. Do you think that this rise in production and manufacturing moving up the value chain needs to move with new thinking in finance and funding, for example? Yeah,
so financing will absolutely be a very important component to fund this new technology and infrastructure. So it needs to be a combination of multiple things. So foreign direct investment will still be very important. Right. It's not just on the private equity, on the funding from the financial institution side, partly because they are also the one that can bring the new technology and new capabilities and know-how. So if we look at the big countries that have implemented this successfully, whether it's South Korea or China, or even the European countries, one of the ways that they have been trying to fund this new technology is through bringing also foreign investors as well. And of course, engaging your local entrepreneur and local champions would be really important as well.
I have to go for the last break, but once we are back, I would like to lay the foundation. Never enough time with great people. So the last few minutes, the fact that, for example, for China, they went low-tech massively. It doesn't matter, almost perception-wise, the quality of it, like cheap toys or cheap garments. They just produce and produce and produce, 90s and early millennium. Then that gives them the cash to move into the higher value chain. I think for Southeast Asia, that's a little bit difficult to do now. And a lot of the wealth that we created from the Industrial Revolution went back into education. Malaysia's budget, I think the biggest amount every year is always for education, not necessarily for automation and modernizing manufacturing. Even the UK, which has a longer history, they are saying that the decline of UK, which part of the factor that pushed for Brexit, was the decline of engineering and manufacturing.
Yes.
No new technology much. So as we go into the break and we'll come back, how do we create IPs, intellectual properties? How do we create new patterns in manufacturing? Because FDI is good, it comes with technology, but we are at the mercy of entities from the outside deciding whether they want to share that with us or do that with us. And then it's sort of trying to pick the best bride. We have to be one of the bride's candidate, and they can pick any country around the world or match us against one another. So how do we go there? That's my question to you, because in Malaysia, there's more than 900,000 small and medium enterprises.
Yes.
In Indonesia, countless more.
Yes.
These are the group that needs to move.
Yes, that's right.
But I don't think R&D is their first thinking, because they're trying to survive with cash flow in a very volatile global market. I know I'm pushing a lot, but great people. Within a few minutes, we'll answer that after the short break. You're still watching a very interesting discussion for me, because I want to know what's the future like for ASEAN, for Malaysia, for Indonesia. Yes, we know all these things about fourth industrial revolution, AI, virtual reality, big data analytics, but at the end of the day, we've got to look at what we have and where we want to move them to. Let's assume all the blueprints of fourth industrial revolution, everything is on the money. But the money is one. We talk about talents and skills, but now I want to go to the reality, like I've said before the break. The micro, small, and medium enterprises, they need technology to change. Before, with the last 3.0, they don't need to do that. They can just open up more booths or more cities that sell their products, and that's it. But now that's not good enough, because goods from the outside, manufactured with the new fourth industrial revolution technology, will be of a better choice for the consumers, just like mobile phones.
Yes.
So how do you look at these parts, and whether the discussions closed door or not in Davos, really thinking of how to create technology from within, because otherwise, just like the semiconductors in the 80s and 90s, we are at the mercy of others.
Yes. So you hit absolutely on the right concern of many governments globally, which is how to make this opportunity from the future of production as an inclusive growth. How do you actually spread the wealth, not just benefiting the great giants, but also our SME. And as you know, in ASEAN countries, whether it's in Malaysia or in Indonesia, SME contribute at least half of the total economic activity. So there are several things that are being discussed on how to get SME there. So we know that for a fact that majority of the countries in ASEAN, whether it's in Malaysia or in Thailand or in Indonesia, have a big focus on SME within this fourth industrial revolution. And some of the ways that have been thought through on how to bring them on board is to give incentive, because technology is not cheap. Yes. So how can we give incentive to the SME to basically leverage the new technology? How can we upskill them? So some of the initiatives like the Singapore A-Star or the EU Horizon 2020, where you bring a mix of academia, the big business, and also SME can be part of it, and they're given grant basically to use the technology and incentive. Those are some of the thinking that are being explored basically to bring them along. Now, if we look actually at some of the good success stories, so I can give you an example of, for example, Bukalapak in Indonesia, or even Gojek in Indonesia. That actually helped to basically flourish the SME much better.
Yes.
So Gojek, for example, before we had Gojek, all the SME cannot sell online, but
Yes.
with Gojek in place, actually all the food vendors, the small food, they can participate.
Yeah.
Yes, network. They can have a bigger order, they can have a bigger network. Similarly for...
I'm sorry, but just to play devil's advocate,
yes.
Gojek, Grab for Malaysia, I don't think they come from the top down of the policymakers and the big giants
yes.
of industry. They came from the grassroots, a few young people
exactly.
thinking.
Yeah. So that's why I guess as a government, it cannot just rely on the government. The government also need to basically give incentive for this local entrepreneur, basically to take charge and think about, how to also bring the SME on board. So
What if we look at it the other way around? Maybe they don't want incentive, but take away the barriers.
Yes, exactly. So Macron yesterday had a very interesting speech. So he was saying that, how can we change the culture so that they are, less fear of taking risk?
Yes.
So how can we incentivize our local entrepreneur or taking the barriers so they can flourish, they can grow, and they can, basically help to do such a successful initiative like Gojek or Bukalapak.
Yes.
So those are the things that the government can think about, whether it's a deregulation, in certain sectors or given certain incentive to basically also encourage your local entrepreneurs or local champion to basically bring the SME
That's why
online.
I raised earlier in the discussion about funding, because all these ideas, maybe they're already there, but to put it into practice, they need that financing and funding.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very regulated world.
Yes.
Central banks, Securities Commission. Not everyone will want to go the old way of raising capital through the capital markets, or waiting for the central bank approvals, because technology moves fast.
Yes.
It's Moore's law quadrupled, for example.
Yeah.
So maybe your insight into that?
Yeah, so it needs to be a combination of multiple things. It needs to be a combination of, how can you incentivize this local entrepreneur to flourish.
Okay.
It needs to be a combination of how can you encourage the global giant or the local giant, the local big companies to also bring the SME along. What sort of incentive can you help them? And what can we do, PPP, not just the government, but private and public partnership, create that platform for SME.
You mentioned Macron. I want to give you Trudeau, another popular leader of a country from Canada. He was so upbeat about the new transformed, what was formerly looked upon as Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now there's a comprehensive word being put in front. Are you positive on that for moving a forced industrial revolution?
Well, I mean, TPP is a sort of like has been discussed a lot. Yes. So I think there's still sort of like two parts of the coins. Okay. People are still thinking also to how to move carefully into TPP and whether the countries are ready.
But ideally, that kind of grouping is what we need.
Yes,
no one country can do this alone.
Exactly. So that is, what we see is that no one country can do this alone. So there needs to be a collaboration within the members.
But isn't it tempting to just ally oneself, if one's in Southeast Asia, to either China or India or both?
To either, Well, it's tempting, but I think that's not the answer.
Okay, that's a stopgap measure.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shirley. There's never enough time with great people. Thanks for giving the insight.
Thank you very much.
Before I let you go, what do you think about giving back? At this forum, this is the question I ask every interviewee, because I think social and industrial now move together. That's why Gojek and other stuff like Grab. So what do you think about giving back? Because the old model of top 4,500 companies, disparities are not being helped. But now, social enterprises and everything else. Your views on that, the values of giving back?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, absolutely, that's the next wave to go. Social entrepreneurship, we need to encourage them. We need to find a way on how we can make them more successful, because those are also the pillars that, can generate the economic growth moving forward as
and
well.
it resonates with both our society well.
Yes,
thank you so much, Shirley,
definitely.
once again. Thanks to you for watching this very specially recorded session of Agenda AWANI right here at the World Comic Forum 2018 in Davos. Good night and goodbye.